You probably see AI models advertising a huge context window. But what is a context window and what does it actually mean? Does a bigger context window mean it can recall better? I'm Jacob from Jacob Labs, and this is part of my AI Foundation series where I break down the core ideas of AI in simple terms as I learn and build. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear definition of a context window, an easy way to picture it, and a practical example for why more context can be useful without guaranteeing you a better answer. So let's start with the simplest definition. As we jump over to Claude Docs, we could basically see that context window is the limited amount of information that the AI gets to use while creating its next response. In a normal chat, that can look like the question you just asked it, earlier conversations in that chat, or any instructions that the AI has been given. In a more advanced system, it could also include things like uploaded documents, images, and things that it pulled up from search. The important detail is that all of this takes up space within the context window. Context is measured in tokens. Tokens are basically a piece of text. A token could be anything from a word, a part of a word, a space, a punctuation, so it's not necessarily just a word. The easiest way to picture this is to think of the context window like a workspace or a desk. Everything the AI can use for its current task is sitting on that hypothetical desk we were just talking about. That can include previous answers, instructions, documents, or tool results. As the conversation continues, more and more material keeps getting added to that desk. And just like a real desk, only so much can be added to it before it runs out of space. A bigger context window is like having a bigger desk. It allows the AI to work with more material at once. We can see here, this is the context window for this example. Don't get it twisted. A bigger context window is not the same thing as a long-term memory. Think of a long-term memory like a filing cabinet that's next to the desk. Yes, it can hold information, but it's not directly in front of that model automatically. The application has to retrieve that relevant information and place it back into the active context before it can be used. Saving an old conversation does not necessarily mean that the old conversation will be remembered in full detail in the future responses. And even if you give the model a bigger desk, it does not guarantee that it'll notice or use that information correctly. A larger context window can be really important because it allows for the model to have more information during the same task. That could mean a larger document, more of a code base, longer conversations, more examples, or more results from tools. But there's an important difference between information fitting inside the window and that model using that information correctly. We can see here that it says, as token count grows, accuracy and recall degrade, a phenomenon known as context rot. This makes curating what's in context just as important as how much space is available. Even though a detail can still be in context, the model can still miss it, confuse it, not give it enough importance, or come to the wrong conclusion with it. Anthropic uses this term context rot for the way that accuracy and recall becomes worse the longer the context gets and it becomes more cluttered. This does not mean that every model fails at some magic number. It just means the more context that builds up, the harder it becomes for it to find that important information that's needed. It's like having a bigger desk. A bigger desk helps you if you need a longer report, your notes, and a few reference documents. But understand this, dumping every file onto that desk does not make the work easier. It can just create more clutter. So the goal is not to fill the context window. It's to give the context window enough information to complete the task without adding any information that does not help. And depending on the product or API, sending more context can also increase the cost or make the response take longer. So even though adding more context can seem useful, it's not automatically better. Here's a simple example of why that matters in a real task. Imagine I upload a long policy document and ask the AI about an exception that appears towards the beginning. If the document, my question, the instructions, and the answer all fit inside of the active context window, then that earlier section is available for the model to use. But if the task becomes too large for the available context, the system has to manage that somehow. Depending on the product, it might reject the input, leave some information out, summarize older material, retrieve only selected passages, or remove older parts of the conversation. So I would not say every AI simply forgets about the oldest message. Different products manage different contexts in different ways. And even when the entire document still fits, the model can still miss the exception or misunderstand it. That's why, when accuracy matters, I would ask it to quote the exact sentence supporting the answer and tell me which section it came from. Enough context gives the model access to the information. It does not guarantee the model will retrieve it or reason from it correctly. So the simplest way to think about this is context is temporary working space, not permanent memory. The context window is a limited amount of information the model can work with during a current response or task. Memory is a bit different. Memory is information stored somewhere else that can be retrieved and placed back into the active context when it is needed. Larger context windows can definitely help with longer documents, conversation, code, and more complicated tasks. But it does not mean the model permanently remembers everything and does not guarantee that every detail inside the window will be used correctly. So here's the practical rule I would remember. Relevant context beats maximum context. Give the model the information and instructions it actually needs. Keep that information organized and verify important answers against the original source. So if this explanation helped, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to Jacob Labs for more simple AI foundation breakdowns. I'm sharing what I learned as I continue building with AI in public.